The early morning light filtered through the tall windows of Clarence's house as Prince William woke up on what would become the most important day of his life. His eyes opened slowly as he realized this was no ordinary Tuesday morning. Today he would become King of England. The weight of this realization settled on his chest like a heavy blanket as he lay in bed for a few extra moments trying to calm his racing heart. His wife, Catherine, was already awake beside him. She had been up since 4 in the morning, unable to sleep from excitement and nerves. She turned to look at her husband and saw the mixture of anticipation and worry written across his face. Without saying a word, she reached over and took his hand in hers. Their fingers intertwined as they both stared at the ceiling, thinking about how their lives were about to change forever. The house was already buzzing with activity even at this early hour. William could hear the sounds of people moving around. Downstairs, royal staff members had arrived before dawn to begin the careful preparations for the coronation ceremony. Every detail had been planned for months, but today everything had to be perfect. There was no room for mistakes when the whole world would be watching. William slowly got out of bed and walked to the large window that overlooked the gardens. The morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. He could already see photographers with their long camera lenses, positioned behind the gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the future king. The sight made his stomach flutter with nervousness. In just a few hours, those same cameras would be focused on him as he walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey. Catherine joined him at the window wrapping, her arms around his waist from behind. She could feel the tension in his shoulders and back. They had talked about this day for years, but now that it was actually here, it felt surreal. She whispered encouraging words in his ear, reminding him that he was ready for this moment. He had been preparing his whole life to be king. A gentle knock on the bedroom door interrupted their quiet moment together. It was William's private secretary informing them that breakfast was ready and that the styling team would arrive in 30 minutes. William nodded and thanked him. The carefully planned schedule for Coronation Day was already beginning. From this moment forward, every minute of his day would be accounted for. As they made their way downstairs, William could smell the familiar scent of English breakfast, tea, and fresh pastries. The dining room had been set with the finest china and crystal glasses. Even breakfast on Coronation Day had to be special. But William found that he had no appetite. His stomach was too tied up in knots to eat much of anything. Catherine encouraged him to at least have some tea and toast. She knew he would need his strength for the long day ahead. The coronation ceremony alone would last several hours, and then there would be the reception and appearances on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. It would be exhausting both physically and emotionally. Their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, came running into the dining room still in their pajamas. They were excited about the special day, even though they didn't fully understand what it meant that their father was becoming king. William smiled genuinely for the first time that morning as he hugged each of his children. Their innocent excitement helped calm some of his nerves. George, who was the oldest, asked his father if he was scared about wearing the heavy crown. William laughed and admitted that he was a little nervous about everything. Charlotte announced that she thought her daddy would look very handsome as a king. Louis just wanted to know if there would be cake at the party later. Their simple questions and comments reminded William of what was truly important. He was doing this for them and for their future. After breakfast, William made his way to the private study where he would spend a few quiet minutes alone before the chaos of the day truly began. This room had always been his sanctuary. The walls were lined with books and family photographs. There was a picture of his mother, Princess Diana, on the desk, along with photos of his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. He felt their presence with him as he sat in the comfortable leather chair. He picked up the speech he would give after the coronation ceremony. He had written and rewritten it dozens of times, trying to find the perfect words to express how he felt about becoming king. The speech talked about service duty and his commitment to the British people. But as he read through it again, he worried that it sounded too formal and distant. He wanted people to feel connected to him as their new king. William set down the speech and closed his eyes. He tried to imagine his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, sitting across from him in the chair she had always preferred. What advice would she give him right now? He could almost hear her voice telling him to trust himself and remember that being king was about serving others, not being served by them. The sound of cars arriving outside brought him back to the present moment. Through the window he could see several black vehicles pulling up to the front entrance. The styling team had arrived right on schedule. Soon, his private study would be transformed into a dressing room where he would put on the most elaborate outfit of his life. Sarah, his personal stylist, knocked on the door and entered with a warm smile. She had been working with William for several years and knew exactly how to help him feel confident and comfortable. Behind her came a team of assistants carrying garment bags and boxes containing every piece of his coronation outfit. Sarah could see the nervousness in William's eyes as she began to unpack the ceremonial robes. She had worked with many celebrities and public figures over the years, but she had never dressed someone who was about to become a king. The responsibility felt enormous. Every detail of his appearance would be analyzed and discussed by millions of people around the world. The coronation robes were more elaborate than anything William had ever worn. The main robe was made of deep navy blue velvet with intricate gold embroidery that had taken skilled craftsmen months to complete. Each thread had been carefully placed to create patterns that told the story of British history and tradition. The weight of the fabric was substantial. William would definitely feel the significance of what he was wearing. As Sarah began to help him dress, William found himself thinking about all the kings who had worn similar robes before him. The tradition of coronation ceremonies stretched back over 1,000 years. He was about to become part of that ancient chain of monarchy that connected him to his ancestors and to the future kings who would come after him. The process of getting dressed was slow and careful. Each piece of the outfit had to be positioned perfectly. The ceremonial shirt was made of the finest white silk with pearl buttons that had been crafted specifically for this occasion. The burgundy silk ascot was tied with precision and adjusted until it sat exactly right against his collar. When Sarah held up the main coronation robe, William took a deep breath. This was the moment when he would truly begin to look like a king. As she helped him into the heavy velvet garment, he felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. The gold embroidery caught the light from the chandelier above, creating an almost magical shimmer across the fabric. Looking at himself in the full-length mirror, William barely recognized the man staring back at him. The person in the reflection looked regal and powerful and ready to take on the enormous responsibility of being king. But inside he still felt like the same person who had woken up nervous and uncertain just a few hours earlier. The convoy of black royal cars moved slowly through the streets of London as Prince William sat in the back seat of the lead vehicle. His coronation robes were carefully arranged around him to prevent any wrinkles or damage during the journey to Westminster Abbey. Through the tinted windows he could see thousands of people lining the streets. They had been waiting since before dawn to catch a glimpse of their future king. The crowds were incredible. People of all ages had traveled from across Britain and around the world to witness this historic moment. Many were waving small British flags, while others held up homemade signs with messages of support and congratulations. Children sat on their parents' shoulders trying to get a better view of the royal procession. The excitement in the air was electric, and William could feel it even from inside the protected car. His private secretary sat beside him, reviewing the final details of the ceremony schedule. Every minute had been planned down to the second. William would enter Westminster Abbey at exactly 11:15 in the morning. The service would begin promptly at 11:30. The actual crowning moment was scheduled for 12:45. But despite all the careful planning, William knew that anything could happen during such a complex event. Catherine and the children were traveling in the car directly behind him. William turned to look back and could see his wife through the rear window. She looked absolutely stunning in her sapphire blue gown that had been designed specifically to complement his coronation outfit. Her smile was radiant as she waved to the crowds. The children were pressed against the windows, clearly amazed by all the people who had come to see their father become king. As they got closer to Westminster Abbey, the crowds became even larger and more enthusiastic. Police officers lined the route, keeping everyone safely behind the barriers. Photographers with massive telephoto lenses were positioned at key points along the way. William knew that every expression on his face would be captured and analyzed by the media. He tried to remain calm and composed even though his heart was beating rapidly. The ancient towers of Westminster Abbey came into view, and William felt his breath catch in his throat. This was really happening. In just a few minutes he would walk through those doors as a prince and emerge hours later as a king. The weight of that transformation felt enormous. He thought about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, who had been crowned in this same building decades earlier. She had been so young when she became queen, but she had served with such dignity and grace throughout her long reign. The car pulled up to the entrance of the Abbey, and William could hear the roar of the crowd even through the heavy doors and bulletproof windows. Security personnel quickly surrounded the vehicle as his door was opened. The moment he stepped out onto the red carpet, the noise from the crowd became deafening. Thousands of people were cheering and calling his name. Camera flashes went off. Like fireworks creating a constant strobe of light, William paused for just a moment before entering the Abbey. He wanted to acknowledge the people who had waited so long to see him. He raised his hand in a wave, and the crowd erupted with even more enthusiasm. Many people were crying with emotion at seeing their future king in person. Others were taking photos and videos with their phones, hoping to capture this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Inside Westminster Abbey, the atmosphere was completely different from the excitement outside. The ancient stone walls seemed to absorb sound, creating an almost reverent quiet. Hundreds of distinguished guests were already seated in the wooden pews. World leaders, heads of state, celebrities, and members of the British nobility had all gathered to witness the coronation. The guest list read like a who is who of global power and influence. William could see his father, King Charles, sitting in the front row wearing his own ceremonial robes. Their eyes met across the Abbey, and Charles gave his son an encouraging nod. This was an emotional moment for both of them. Charles had waited his entire life to become king, and now he was watching his son prepare to take on that same responsibility. The pride in his father's eyes was unmistakable. The Archbishop of Canterbury approached William at the entrance of the Abbey. This elderly man would be the one to place the crown on William's head and officially make him king. They had rehearsed this ceremony many times, but both men knew that the actual event would feel completely different from any practice session. The Archbishop spoke quietly to William, offering words of encouragement and blessing before the service began. As William began his slow walk down the aisle of Westminster Abbey, every eye in the building turned to watch him. His footsteps echoed off the stone floor, creating a rhythmic sound that seemed to match his heartbeat. The coronation robes flowed behind him, creating an impressive visual that would be remembered for generations. The gold embroidery on his outfit caught the light from the stained glass windows and seemed to glow with an inner fire. Halfway down the aisle, William caught sight of Catherine and their children in the front row. Catherine was already crying with emotion at seeing her husband in his full royal regalia. She had never seen him look more handsome or more kingly. Their children were wide-eyed with wonder at the grandeur of the ceremony and the importance of what was happening to their father. The closer William got to the altar, the more real everything became. This was not a dream or a rehearsal. This was actually happening. In less than 2 hours, he would be crowned King of England and head of the Commonwealth. The responsibility was staggering, but he felt ready to accept it. His entire life had been preparation for this moment. Television cameras positioned throughout the Abbey were broadcasting every second of the ceremony to millions of viewers around the world. Social media was already exploding with comments and reactions to William's appearance and the grandeur of the event. Hashtags related to the coronation were trending globally as people shared their excitement about witnessing history in the making. The music began as William reached the altar area. The Abbey choir had been practicing for months to ensure their performance would be perfect. Their voices rose to the vaulted ceiling, creating a sound that was both beautiful and deeply moving. Many of the guests in the Abbey were visibly emotional as they listened to the ancient hymns and watched William prepare to take his place in British History. William took his position at the altar and turned to face the congregation. Looking out at all the faces watching him, he felt a surge of determination and purpose. These people were counting on him to be a good king. The British people and citizens of the Commonwealth nations were trusting him with their futures. He would not let them down. The moment Prince William took his place at the altar of Westminster Abbey, the entire atmosphere seemed to shift. The hundreds of guests fell into complete silence as they prepared to witness one of the most important ceremonies in British history. William could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him like a physical force. Every person in that ancient building was watching his every move and expression. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood before William holding the ancient prayer book that had been used in coronation ceremonies for centuries. His voice was strong and clear as he began the traditional opening prayers. The words echoed through the abbey, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. William tried to focus on the meaning behind the ancient language, but his mind kept wandering to thoughts of his family and the enormous responsibility he was about to accept. Catherine sat in the front row with their 3 children, and William could see the pride and love shining in her eyes. She had chosen her outfit carefully to complement his coronation robes, and she looked absolutely radiant in the soft light filtering through the stained glass windows. Their children were trying their best to sit still and behave properly, but William could see the excitement and wonder on their young faces as they watched their father participate in this historic ceremony. The first part of the coronation service involved William taking several sacred oaths. He had to promise to govern the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth nations according to their laws and customs. He had to vow to maintain the Protestant Reformed religion and to protect the Church of England. These were not just words to William. He understood that he was making solemn promises that would guide every decision he made as king. As William spoke his responses to the Archbishop, his voice carried clearly through the abbey. Millions of people watching on television around the world could hear the sincerity and determination in his tone. He was not just reciting memorized words. He was speaking from his heart about his commitment to serve his people with honor and dedication. The emotion in his voice brought tears to the eyes of many watching both in person and on screen. The most moving part of the early ceremony came when William was presented to the people. The Archbishop turned to face the congregation and asked if they were willing to do homage to their new king. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every person in Westminster Abbey rose to their feet and called out their acceptance with voices that seemed to shake the ancient stone walls. The sound was incredible, and William felt a surge of emotion at hearing such unified support. Social media exploded during this moment as viewers shared their reactions to the powerful scene. Videos of the congregation rising and calling out their support for William went viral within minutes. People around the world were commenting on how moving it was to see such a display of unity and tradition. The hashtags related to the coronation were trending in dozens of countries as people shared their excitement about witnessing this historic moment. The ceremony continued with the reading of several biblical passages that had been chosen specifically for their relevance to kingship and service. William listened carefully to each word, trying to absorb the wisdom and guidance they contained. One passage spoke about the responsibilities of leadership and the importance of putting the needs of others before your own desires. These words resonated deeply with William, who had always understood that being king meant being a servant to his people. During a quiet moment in the service, William allowed his eyes to wander around the magnificent interior of Westminster Abbey. The soaring arches and intricate stone carvings told the story of nearly 1,000 years of English history. Kings and queens had been crowned in this very spot for generations. The weight of that tradition was both inspiring and intimidating. William felt connected to all the monarchs who had come before him, while also understanding that he would need to bring his own vision and leadership style to the role. The television cameras captured every nuance of William's expressions during these reflective moments. Viewers at home could see the mixture of reverence, determination, and slight nervousness that played across his face. Many people commented on social media about how human and relatable he appeared despite the grandeur of the ceremony surrounding him. This was not a distant figurehead, but a real person taking on an enormous responsibility. Catherine watched her husband with growing emotion as the ceremony progressed. She had known this day would come eventually, but seeing William actually going through the coronation process made it feel completely real for the first time. Her own life was changing dramatically as well. In a few hours she would be the wife of the King of England. The thought was both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. The children were fascinated by all the pageantry and traditions surrounding them. Prince George, as the oldest, understood more about what was happening and watched his father with serious attention. Princess Charlotte was amazed by all the beautiful robes and ceremonial objects. Prince Louis was doing his best to sit quietly but occasionally whispered questions to his mother about what was happening. Their innocent reactions to the ceremony provided some of the most touching moments for viewers watching at home. As the service moved toward its climax, William could feel his heart rate increasing. Soon would come the moment when the actual crown would be placed on his head. Everything up to this point had been preparation for that single transformative instant, when he would officially become king. The St. Edward's crown sat on a velvet cushion nearby, seeming to glow with an inner light from all the precious stones embedded in its golden frame. The Archbishop began the prayers that would immediately precede the crowning ceremony. His words spoke of divine blessing and the sacred nature of kingship. William bowed his head as directed and tried to prepare himself mentally and spiritually for what was about to happen. In just a few minutes, the course of his entire life would be forever altered. The Abbey fell into absolute silence, as everyone present understood that they were about to witness the most important moment of the entire ceremony. Television viewers around the world leaned forward in anticipation. Social media activity reached fever pitch as people prepared to capture and share the historic moment when Prince William would become King William. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and reverence as centuries of tradition were about to culminate in a single crowning moment. The moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived as the Archbishop of Canterbury approached the altar where the St. Edward's crown rested on its velvet cushion. The ancient crown seemed to radiate power and majesty as light from the stained glass windows caught the hundreds of precious stones embedded in its golden frame. William felt his breathing become shallow as he realized that in mere moments this crown would be placed upon his head, making him King of England. The silence in Westminster Abbey was so complete that William could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. Nearly 2,000 guests sat motionless in their seats, afraid to make even the slightest sound that might disturb this sacred moment. Television cameras positioned throughout the Abbey zoomed in to capture every detail of the crown and William's face as he prepared for the transformation that would change his life forever. The Archbishop lifted the heavy crown with both hands and held it high above William's head. The weight of the crown was substantial, but it was nothing compared to the symbolic weight of what it represented. This crown had been used to crown English monarchs for over 300 years. It contained gold from ancient mines and gems that had been collected from across the former British Empire. Each stone and each piece of metal told a story of history and tradition. William closed his eyes as he felt the presence of the crown hovering above his head. In this moment he thought about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, who had worn this same crown during her own coronation so many years earlier. He thought about his mother, Princess Diana, who would have been so proud to see this day. He thought about his children watching from the front row and the kind of world he wanted to create for their future. The Archbishop began to speak the ancient words that had been used in coronation ceremonies for centuries. His voice carried clearly through the Abbey as he called upon divine blessing for the new king. William kept his eyes closed and tried to absorb the full meaning of what was happening. This was not just a ceremony or a tradition. This was a sacred moment that would bind him to his people and to his duty as their sovereign. As the crown slowly descended toward his head, William felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. All the nervousness and anxiety he had been feeling suddenly melted away. In its place came a feeling of readiness and determination. He was prepared for this moment. His entire life had been leading up to this instant when he would accept the full responsibility of kingship. The moment the golden crown touched William's head, a visible transformation seemed to occur. His posture straightened and his shoulders squared as if the weight of the crown had actually given him strength rather than burdening him. The congregation held its breath as they witnessed this magical moment when a prince became a king. It was as if they could actually see the transfer of power and authority happening before their eyes. Catherine watched from the front row with tears streaming down her face as she saw her husband officially become king. The man she had fallen in love with at university was now the sovereign ruler of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth nations. The crown suited him perfectly, and he looked every inch the king he had been born to become. She felt overwhelming pride and love as she watched him accept this enormous responsibility with such grace and dignity. Their children reacted to the crowning moment with wonder and excitement. Prince George understood the significance of what was happening and watched with serious attention as his father became king. Princess Charlotte clapped her hands together quietly when she saw the beautiful crown on her father's head. Prince Louis pointed excitedly at his father and whispered to his mother about how handsome Daddy looked as a king. The internet exploded with reactions to the crowning moment as millions of people around the world shared their thoughts and emotions about witnessing history being made. Social media platforms crashed temporarily from the volume of posts and comments about the ceremony. Photographers captured the exact moment when the crown settled on William's head, and these images immediately became some of the most iconic photos in modern royal history. Television commentators struggled to find words adequate to describe the power and emotion of the crowning moment. Many had covered royal events for decades, but none had ever witnessed anything quite like this transformation from prince to king. The visual impact of William in his full coronation regalia with the crown upon his head was breathtaking and unforgettable. As soon as the crown was securely positioned on his head, William opened his eyes and looked out at the congregation. His gaze was steady and confident as he surveyed the faces watching him. These people were now his subjects and he was their king. The relationship between them had fundamentally changed in that single moment when the crown touched his head. The Archbishop stepped back and called out the traditional words that officially announced the completion of the crowning ceremony. His voice boomed through the Abbey as he proclaimed William to be the rightful king. The congregation responded with thunderous applause and shouts of acclamation that seemed to shake the ancient building to its foundations. King William stood, tall and proud as the cheers and applause washed over him. The crown felt surprisingly comfortable on his head, as if it had been made specifically for him. The weight that had seemed so intimidating just moments before now felt reassuring and right. He was no longer Prince William. He was now King William, and he was ready to serve his people with honor and dedication. The ceremony continued with additional prayers and blessings, but the most important moment had passed. William had been crowned king, and there was no going back. The transformation was complete and irreversible. He belonged to his people now in a way that he had never belonged to anyone before. The crown on his head was not just a symbol of power, but a reminder of his duty to serve others before himself. Television cameras captured every detail of William's expression as he stood there newly crowned as king. Viewers around the world could see the mixture of solemnity and joy on his face as he accepted the weight of his new role. The boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin had grown into a man worthy of wearing the crown of England. The newly crowned King William turned to face his family for the first time since receiving the crown, and the moment was filled with such powerful emotion that it left barely a dry eye in Westminster Abbey. Catherine rose gracefully from her seat in the front row and performed a perfect curtsy to her husband, who was now officially her king. The sight of the woman he loved showing him this formal respect in his new role brought tears to William's eyes, even as he tried to maintain his royal composure. Their 3 children followed their mothers' lead, with Prince George executing a formal bow that he had been practicing for weeks. Princess Charlotte performed her own small curtsy while trying not to giggle at the formality of the moment. Prince Louis attempted to copy his older siblings, but ended up waving enthusiastically at his father instead, which brought gentle laughter from the congregation and millions of viewers watching around the world. The tender family moment was captured by dozens of cameras and immediately became one of the most shared images from the entire coronation ceremony. Social media users posted the photos with comments about how touching it was to see such genuine love and affection between the royal family members. Many people noted how the formal protocol of the ceremony gave way to real human emotion in this beautiful family interaction. King William then turned to address the nation and the Commonwealth for the first time as their sovereign ruler. His voice was strong and clear as he began to speak the words he had carefully prepared for this moment. The speech had been written and rewritten many times over the past months as William struggled to find the perfect way to express his feelings about becoming king and his commitment to serving his people. He spoke about the honor and responsibility he felt in accepting the crown and promised to dedicate his life to the service of others. His words were heartfelt and sincere as he talked about the challenges facing the modern world and his determination to be a king who brought people together rather than dividing them. The speech struck exactly the right tone, being both formal enough for the occasion but personal enough to connect with ordinary people. As William spoke, the cameras captured every nuance of his expression and body language. Viewers could see the genuine emotion behind his words and the weight of responsibility he was accepting. Many people commented on social media about how authentic and relatable he seemed despite wearing the crown and elaborate robes that set him apart from everyone else in the building. The internet response to William's first speech as king was overwhelmingly positive. People from around the world shared clips of his words and praised his eloquence and sincerity. The hashtags related to his speech began trending immediately, as viewers expressed their admiration for their new king and their optimism about his reign. Many noted how different his approach seemed from previous generations of royalty. When the speech concluded, the congregation erupted in sustained applause that seemed to go on forever. The sound echoed through the ancient stone walls of Westminster Abbey, creating an atmosphere of celebration and approval. King William acknowledged the applause with a grateful nod and a warm smile that showed how moved he was by the positive response to his words. The final portion of the coronation ceremony involved the presentation of various ceremonial objects that symbolized different aspects of royal power and responsibility. The Archbishop presented William with the orb, which represented his role as defender of the faith. The scepter symbolized his temporal power as head of state. Each object was heavy with both physical weight and symbolic meaning. As William received each ceremonial item, he understood that he was not just accepting decorative objects, but taking on the real responsibilities they represented. The orb reminded him of his duty to protect religious freedom and tolerance. The scepter represented his role in governing fairly and justly. These were not empty symbols, but concrete reminders of what being king truly meant. The ceremony concluded with a magnificent performance by the Westminster Abbey choir, whose voices soared to the vaulted ceiling in a hymn of celebration and thanksgiving. The music was both beautiful and deeply moving, creating an atmosphere of reverence and joy that perfectly captured the significance of the moment. Many of the guests and viewers at home found themselves crying as the powerful voices filled the ancient building. King William stood throughout the final hymn with the crown secure on his head and the ceremonial robes flowing around him. He looked every inch the king he had become, and the transformation from the nervous prince who had entered the Abbey just hours earlier was remarkable. The confidence and authority he now projected seemed to radiate from him like a visible aura. As the ceremony officially ended, King William began his procession back down the aisle of Westminster Abbey. This time his walk was different from his entrance as a prince. His steps were more confident and measured. His bearing was more regal and commanding. The crown on his head caught the light streaming through the stained glass windows, creating an almost magical effect that left everyone watching in awe. Catherine and the children fell into step behind the new king as they made their way toward the exit of the Abbey. The sight of the royal family walking together with William in his full coronation regalia was breathtaking. Photographers captured every step of this historic procession, knowing that these images would be studied and admired for generations to come. The guests in Westminster Abbey rose to their feet as King William passed their rows. Many were openly emotional at witnessing this transformation and the successful completion of such an important ceremony. World leaders and dignitaries who had traveled from around the globe to attend the coronation showed their respect with formal bows and nods of acknowledgement to the new king. As the royal family approached the great doors of Westminster Abbey, the sound of cheering crowds outside began to filter into the building. Thousands of people had been waiting for hours to see their new king emerge from the ceremony. The anticipation and excitement outside was building to a crescendo, as everyone prepared to get their first glimpse of King William in his full coronation glory. The massive oak doors of the Abbey swung open and sunlight streamed into the ancient building. King William paused for just a moment at the threshold, preparing himself for the next phase of this historic day. In a few seconds he would step outside as king for the first time and face the cheering crowds who had come to celebrate this momentous occasion. King William stepped out of Westminster Abbey into the bright London sunshine and was immediately greeted by the most incredible roar of approval he had ever heard in his life. Thousands upon thousands of people lined the streets as far as the eye could see, all cheering and waving flags in celebration of their new king. The sound was so loud and overwhelming that it seemed to vibrate through his entire body. This was the moment when the reality of being king truly hit him with full force. The sight that greeted the newly crowned king was absolutely spectacular. The entire route from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace was packed with people who had traveled from every corner of Britain and beyond to witness this historic day. Many had been camping out for days to secure the best viewing spots along the procession route. Union Jack flags fluttered in the breeze, creating a sea of red, white, and blue that stretched as far as William could see. As William appeared in the doorway of the Abbey wearing the St. Edward's crown and his magnificent coronation robes, the crowd erupted into even louder cheers. People were crying with emotion at seeing their new king for the first time. Others were taking photos and videos with their phones, trying to capture this once-in-a-lifetime moment. The energy and excitement from the crowd was infectious, and William found himself smiling broadly as he waved to his people. The Golden State coach was waiting at the bottom of the Abbey steps to carry the royal family back to Buckingham Palace. This ornate carriage had been used for royal ceremonies for over 200 years and was considered one of the most beautiful vehicles in the world. The coach was decorated with intricate carvings and covered in genuine gold leaf that sparkled brilliantly in the sunshine. 8 magnificent gray horses stood ready to pull the coach through the streets of London. Catherine emerged from the Abbey behind her husband, looking absolutely radiant in her sapphire gown. The crowd cheered loudly for their new queen consort, who waved gracefully to the people lining the route. Their 3 children followed close behind, still amazed by all the pageantry and excitement surrounding them. The sight of the entire royal family together in their ceremonial finery was breathtaking and created some of the most memorable images of the entire day. As the royal family climbed into the Golden State, Coach William carefully arranged his coronation robes to prevent them from being damaged during the journey. The crown on his head felt secure and comfortable, as if it had been made specifically for him. Catherine sat beside him, holding his hand as they prepared for the triumphant ride through London that would take them back to Buckingham Palace for the final celebrations of Coronation Day. The procession began slowly, with the golden coach moving at a stately pace that allowed everyone along the route to get a good look at their new king and his family. Mounted guards in their ceremonial uniforms rode alongside the coach, while military bands played stirring march that added to the festive atmosphere. The entire spectacle was like something from a fairy tale brought to life in the heart of modern London. Social media exploded with activity as people shared photos and videos of King William in the golden coach. The images of him wearing the crown and waving to the crowds became instant viral sensations that were shared millions of times within the first hour. Hashtags related to the coronation procession began trending worldwide, as people from every continent expressed their excitement about witnessing this historic moment. Television cameras, positioned along the procession route, captured every detail of the royal family's journey back to the palace. Commentators struggled to find words adequate to describe the visual spectacle of the golden coach carrying the newly crowned king through streets packed with cheering supporters. Many noted that this was probably the largest crowd ever assembled. For a royal event in British history, the crowds lining the route were incredibly diverse, representing people from all walks of life in every corner of the Commonwealth. Families with young children stood next to elderly couples who remembered previous coronations. Tourists from around the world mixed with local Londoners who had never missed a major royal event. Everyone was united in their excitement about seeing their new king and celebrating this historic day. As the golden coach made its way through central London, William was amazed by the creativity and enthusiasm of the people who had come to see him. Many were wearing elaborate costumes and carrying homemade signs with messages of congratulations and support. Some groups had organized coordinated displays with matching outfits and banners. The effort that people had put into celebrating his coronation was deeply moving and humbling. When the procession finally reached Buckingham Palace, the crowds gathered in front of the building were even larger and more enthusiastic than those along the route. The famous balcony where the royal family would make their traditional appearance was decorated with flowers and bunting for the occasion. Police estimated that over 500,000 people had gathered in the area around the palace, hoping to catch a glimpse of the new king. Inside Buckingham Palace, staff members were making final preparations for the balcony appearance that would mark the official end of Coronation Day. The timing had to be perfect, as millions of people around the world were waiting to see King William and his family appear on the famous balcony. This would be his first public appearance as king from the palace that was now truly his home. The golden coach pulled into the courtyard of Buckingham Palace and came to a stop in front of the main entrance. Palace guards stood at attention as King William stepped down from the carriage, still wearing his crown and coronation robes. The transformation from the nervous prince who had woken up that morning to the confident king who now walked into his palace was remarkable and complete. Catherine and the children followed William into the palace, where they would have a few minutes to prepare for the balcony appearance. This would be the final public moment of Coronation Day, and everyone knew it had to be perfect. The crowds outside were growing more excited by the minute as they waited for their first glimpse of King William as their sovereign ruler. The internet was buzzing with anticipation for the balcony appearance as people around the world prepared to witness the conclusion of this historic day. The images and videos from the coronation ceremony and procession had already broken numerous social media records, and the balcony moment was expected to generate even more excitement and engagement from viewers everywhere. William looked out through the palace windows at the massive crowd gathered below and felt overwhelmed by the love and support of his people. This had been the most important day of his life, and he knew that he would remember every moment of it forever. He was now King William, and he was ready to serve his people with dedication, honor, and love for the rest of his life.